Many thanks, folks, for joining us today. My name is Declan Morris. My predominant role is as project manager of Extern Homes with Extern, but I'm here as the co-chair today of the Homelessness Prevention Forum alongside Paul Fleming from Niagara, who co-chairs the Homelessness Prevention Forum with me and has done for a number of years. We would just like to say a huge thanks to the Northern Ireland Social Care Council for the opportunity to talk to you today and utilise one of the lunchtime seminars. And this week of all weeks, which marks Homelessness Awareness Week in Northern Ireland. So extended thanks to the Northern Ireland Social Care Council for acknowledging homelessness within their lunchtime seminars and for kindly doing it in this week of all weeks this year. Just want to talk you through a little bit about what we'll chat about today. So essentially what we want to cover is a little bit about us, a little bit about who we are as a homelessness prevention forum, and reflect a little bit too on the work that we have done and the work that we have done to date, which finds us here today, which very much is about promoting and sharing with you a little bit of the content of our homelessness awareness training tool. So we will cover a little bit of that in our seminar today, but we want to tell you a little bit about who we are and what our members are about. Essentially, the forum is made up of a number of floating support services, and we'll talk a little bit to that too, about what floating support is and how it helps, or how we believe it helps homelessness prevention. We also want to reflect a little bit on, obviously, the social care field and looking at the on the strategy around social work, and we do that as a way of sort of highlighting the connection between the work of health and social care and homelessness prevention and the services within homelessness prevention and how they connect and the similarities in the work that they do. We're very keen to continue to collaborate as a forum and work with others to try and improve the services that are delivered to those most in need. We'll also, throughout the day, just to say, you will hear, and all being well, we have tested it and it should go fine. We have some videos to share with you that are part of the larger training tool that we've created. And so just be mindful that the video pieces talk to the training tool, but you're lucky enough today that we're going to play some of those for you today to help you understand some of the messages that we want to explore. And at the end, we have an ask. We wouldn't be here if we weren't trying to promote something. And essentially, we will want to hopefully see an increase in people using the training tool to raise their level of awareness around homelessness prevention. And that for us is the key message, particularly this week, which is the theme of Homelessness Awareness Week this week is about having the conversation. And I suppose at the end of this seminar, we want people to continue that conversation, and particularly the conversation around homelessness prevention. So just to start us off, the first sort of piece that we want to share with you, the first video piece we would like to share with you is a piece that is inside our training tool. And it's a piece that just hopefully tries to focus people's minds on that word, homeless. For many people, and there may well be people on this call or on this seminar who have experienced homelessness. We don't know that. There are maybe people on this call who have had close family members or friends experience homelessness. But for many of us, I would imagine that hasn't been the case, and it's important for us, and what's important for us when we put this training tool together, that we stop and we reflect on that word homeless and what it means and how we define it. And this little video is just our way, I suppose, within the forum to sort of say, okay, let's take some time, let's try and understand what this word means, and hopefully this focuses our attention for the seminar going ahead.
Welcome. To the Homelessness Prevention Forum training tool. We believe it is important to try and understand what homelessness is before we begin, although this can prove very difficult for those who haven't experienced homelessness. So what we'd like you to do is break that word down and consider the word home just for a few seconds. What words spring to mind when we think of the word home? We believe that when we think of the word home, it tends to conjure up words like family, warmth, comfort, love, maybe. We maybe even think of our TV or the bed that we sleep in or the possessions that we have. I hope this little exercise has shown you that homelessness is more than just a house or the bricks and mortar that create a house. We need more than that to consider where we live, a home. Therefore, when we try to define homelessness, we should consider what home means to us first, and then try to understand what it might be like not to have family supports, not to feel warmth or comfortable in our lives, not to have enough love or support around us maybe, and not to have the possessions that we sometimes take for granted. Homelessness might therefore be considered having less or none of these things that we believe make a home.
Okay, folks. Hopefully, like I say, that little piece was a useful way of just sort of concentrating our minds on the issue of homelessness and defining it, define the word, and see it as a much wider issue than sometimes the stereotypes that are associated with homelessness do. Okay, well, look, as promised, I just wanted to share with you a little bit about the work of the Homelessness Prevention Forum and look at sort of telling you a little bit about how we were formed. So we were formed back in 2013.
On the call, okay.
To
Just check it. Can we just check everyone's still on the call, okay? Just we got a Zoom crash.
No, we're all still here. We're fine.
Yeah, fine.
yeah, so folks, just wanted to share with you a little bit about a brief history of who we are and what we were about as a forum. So we were formed back in 2013, and essentially the forum, like I had mentioned before, is a forum made up of floating support services within Belfast and now the greater Belfast area, and actually wider. Some of the services or members of our forum are actually providing services across Northern Ireland now. And it really was a means of coming together to better, I suppose, better serve those people who most needed our support. I think historically and back then there was people would accuse perhaps that there was an issue around sort of the competitive nature of having our service users working in, or my service user or my client working in my service. And we wanted to get away from that language. We wanted to talk more about the fact that actually collaboratively we need to be much more smarter about how we work, and more importantly ensure that those who needed our support were getting the support from the most appropriate service provider. And that is very much at the forefront of what we do, as well as promoting, obviously, the benefits of floating support and how it helps prevent homelessness. So some of the ways that we've done that in the past is coming up with sort of common inquiry forms so that people are applying to receive a service and can see through a services directory that we created back in 2015. And a little picture to the right is a picture of old members and still some current members of the forum showing off our service directory. And now we find ourselves in 2022, and we'll talk a little bit to it later on about how we've now developed a website and this training tool to maybe better reach people or reach people much further about our services and who we are. We all obviously come together to respond collectively to consultations around strategy. Better that we do it collectively than individually, I think, sometimes, you know. The Northern Ireland Housing Executive approached us to carry out some work around the Belfast Area Action Plan for homelessness prevention, which we were happy to do. But essentially, it was and still remains a forum whereby services come together and share and reflect and learn from each other. to improve what we do and be smarter about what we do for those who most need our services. I just want to reflect, like I said, I would a little bit conscious of who our hosts are at the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. Important for us to reflect around social work and the strategy of social work, the strategy for social work in Northern Ireland, which talks about improving and safeguarding social wellbeing. And I'll not go into each of these points specifically, but I think it's important to look at the connection that there is between this strategy and the work that the homelessness prevention services or flooding support services do on a daily basis, as well as health and social care staff and social work staff across Northern Ireland. But even just to point out a couple of the items that we wanted to share from the strategy, it talks about the promoting of the rights and independence. So the independence of the most vulnerable and marginalised in society. I think that resonates very much with people who are homeless. I mean, I think it could be easily argued that the people who find themselves homeless or at risk of homelessness are those that probably find themselves most vulnerable and marginalised in society. We look at the last point around working with people in need and supporting their right to autonomy and self-management of their lives and or of their care. Again, flooding support services and homelessness prevention services, quintessentially, that is what it's about. It's about helping maintain and sustain people in their communities and in their homes and be independent of services. And Paul will allude to some of that later on. But just to sort of capture a little bit what I thought was really important to capture in the strategy is that it talks about it being a strategy for change. Some might think it's strange, sorry, the strategy for change. And the idea of strengthening the capacity of the workforce. I suppose, again, I hark back to the training tool, the awareness training tool that we've created. We have found, certainly within our membership, that it has become a great tool to strengthen our workforce, particularly our new workforce coming into the sector. And it's been a tool that they have used to induct staff into their services and help them understand the complexities of the issue and understand the wide variety of services that there are available within the sector. So we hope too that this can be something that connects and coalesces with the strategy and something that we'd be happy to explore. And we'll talk a little bit to that later on as well. So I'm actually just going to, I think it's my turn to pass over to Paul. You'll hear less of me now and a little bit more of Paul. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a wee bit about floating support. So floating support, the term floating support, even by most of our members, are all floating support providers. It's quite a strange term, as Declan even mentioned earlier. Try to see floating support as housing related support. The reason why we see it as a vital preventative tool, essentially we're talking about supporting people to sustain and remain in their home. We're talking about helping people to deal with issues with neighbours, deal with issues around their house, deal with even issues around other disputes, maybe even things as serious as hate crimes, and trying to see can we address them in a certain way and help the individual remain in their home. I'm going to play a short animation, which is just helps describe a wee bit more about floating support, or what we would prefer to be called as housing related support.
The primary purpose of floating support services are broadly the same, but with minor distinctions in service delivery, which is dependent on the particular needs of the people in need of support. This broad range of specialisms ensures that the right expertise exists in understanding the complexity of issues people at risk of homelessness may face. During this training, we wanted to make sure that you would now be familiar with floating support and its benefits. More importantly, we want you to consider using floating support services when helping someone who is at risk of homelessness by putting them in contact with an appropriate service that may help them. In the next slide, you'll have an opportunity to find out more about the services that are members of the Homelessness Prevention Forum. Please take a moment to find out more about each one. You can also go to our website where you can directly link to any of the services that are listed. Together, in partnership, we can prevent homelessness. Floating Support is a free...
Okay, I just moved on to this next slide, okay?
Yes,
Okay, good. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So floating support, housing related support, it is available to anybody irrespective of their tenure. So you might come across an individual who owns their own home. They may be renting from a social landlord, or they may even be renting from a private landlord. And essentially it's to help deal with those issues that puts their home at risk. In other words, to try to prevent homelessness. Those range of things can be anything from dealing with debt, employment, looking at about their upkeep of the property, helping someone do things like budgeting. But essentially it's about trying to say, okay, can we help you remain in your home and therefore stop the cycle of homelessness? We know homelessness is very, very complex, and we'll talk a wee bit about that more. So we have these range of services in relation to our floating support, but we also were very aware that in particular landlords weren't referring to floating support services, weren't referring to housing related support until they hit the A&E. And when we talk about A&E, we talk about A&E and housing in relation to quite often when they're showing up in the housing executives' offices. And we wanted to avoid that. We wanted to ensure that we could get working with those individuals sooner. Well, we needed to find out a wee bit more information behind that. So the first of its kind, we decided to do a wee bit of research back at the end of 2021 into the reasons why people don't refer into floating support, housing related support. And these are some of, sorry, I'll just go back a slide. These are some of the key findings. So the first was issues and use of floating support, not knowing when to refer. So quite often there was this thing about, when do I, bring this up to a housing related support service? Is it enough that maybe I'm getting a phone call from a neighbour who's saying, oh, I'm not sure if they're looking after their property, or, I've noticed they're not coming out of the house. Is that not a little bit intrusive? Or maybe the finding that quite often, as we find with a lot of our clients that we're supporting, maybe they're getting a number of calls, ambulances are being called frequently, maybe the police are calling occasionally to the house, neighbours are getting worried, maybe they're even complaining to their landlord that it's keeping them awake. But again, not sure about when to refer. Another issue was the entry requirements of the service. 58% said that this was sometimes or frequently an issue. And I think that was quite a sharp figure for us as services to look at, about why, when we would like to think our services are very open, as I've said earlier, they're open to everybody irrespective of their tenure. And we've done some work in relation to things that Declan spoke earlier in relation to the common inquiry form, to make referrals into the services as easy as possible. However, it's recognising that we probably still have some work to go there. But also in terms of the entry requirements, is there perhaps some myths around the actual nature of when to refer in? Myself and Declan are very proactive in having meetings with a number of different types of landlords. And again, it comes up quite often, oh, they have to have a certain level of tenancy, they have to have a certain level of tenancy breakdown, they have to be in temporary accommodation, when actually none of those apply. This is something that was really stark to us. So I'm going to show you a list of the services that are part of our forum, which is just under 20 members. But across the whole of the North, there are over 100 floating support services, 100 different services that can support people to help prevent homelessness, 100 services that can help people to remain and sustain their accommodation. But in relation to landlords, we found that over 50% were familiar with less than 5 of those services. And indeed, that probably accounts for why across the forum, as a wider collective, less than 10% of our referrals actually come from landlords. It doesn't mean that our services are not busy, and some of our services may be very close to capacity or at capacity. But again, what we're trying to say is the earlier we can work, the better we can work with individuals. And that's really what we're trying to do. So they were some of the key stats, and these are a short introduction to some of the services. Hopefully some of you are already very familiar with a lot of the services that I'm showing you today. But if you talk about, and as we do with Inside Homelessness, we talk about thematic groups. And there are thematic groups such as older people, younger people, homelessness, and there's a whole range of services here. But there are also very specialised services as well. We have specialised services working with people from the travelling community, people working with refugees, asylum seekers. We have people working with people with a range of disabilities, including autism. And we have Actionability Belfast, we have SEER, we have people working with people obviously then with brain injury, acquired brain injury. And we also have obviously services like myself and Declan represent, which will also work with people in with the criminal justice system. I'm going to move on then to say, okay, well, we had these services. We realised there were some issues in relation to the promotion of the services. We were fortunate enough to secure a very small pot of money from the housing executive, but it did allow us to say, okay, well, what is the unique piece of work that we could do that would help address some of these issues? Sorry, and I'm going to pass you back to Declan.
Thank you, Paul. One thing I'll address before I do move on, I'm conscious what I should have said at the beginning is if there are any questions throughout the seminar, please feel free to just type them into the wee chat box. I know Brian and Gillian were kind enough to say that they'll keep an eye on that. Just checking, and I know it's the first time I've offered that to you folks, but we'll take questions at the end. If there was any key things coming out at the moment, Gillian, in the chat, I'm happy to address them now before we move on.
No, I'd put a wee message in the chat, Declan, for people to do that as we went along. So we don't have anything specific so far that
No problem.
that you need to address, so you can carry on.
Yeah, thank you, Gillian. Okay, so like Paul says, we didn't do this on a whim. We carried out a number of pieces of work to get us to the point where we said, right, well, okay, the starting point for us as a forum needs to be about raising the level of awareness around the issue of homelessness prevention. So we've already shared with you, and again, apologies from myself and Paul for the technical issues. We've already started to share with you some of the content of what's inside our training and awareness tool, and we'll continue to share some more with you too. But this outlines very much the content of what we have created. So you'll have heard the piece around defining homelessness. We want to make sure that we reflect on that within the training tool, and obviously then sort of review the reasons for homelessness. And I know there are many people on the call who will know that they have come across people who have been homeless and the reasons for it. And we know that they're wide in a variety of reasons why people present as homeless. And I think Paul has just touched on the services that help prevent homelessness and the thematic groups in which they sit. They all represent the reasons why people sometimes become homeless, and certainly it's key for us that people engage with them at an early stage so that it can be prevented. Obviously, we also then wanted to look at identifying the risks and the early warning signs. And this, as I say, the content, and we'll share some of this with you. We don't have the answers, all of the answers, but certainly this was done as a collective piece of people who provide these preventative services and these housing related support services. So hopefully we will have captured, and we captured some of the identified risks and early warning signs, again, which is to improve people's awareness of the early warning signs so that we can act quicker and engage sooner with people. And yeah, also we explore the meaning behind homelessness prevention. It has long been a term that is used, and certainly within the Northern Ireland Housing Executive's homelessness strategy, it talks about homelessness prevention being at the core of service delivery, and has done for a number of years. And it's vitally important that we understand what that means. And it can mean very simply that we just stop people becoming homeless. That's okay, yes, but I think it's vitally important that we understand the reasons, we understand the early warning signs, and we really get to grips with what early intervention and prevention looks like in this sector. Well, already touched on, and you'll appreciate as a forum that promotes the work of floating support or housing related support, we obviously want to touch on the benefits of that service, and you'll hear a little bit about that at the end. And you've already seen from Paul an introduction to those floating support services, and we go beyond just sort of showing you the logos within the training tool. We will also talk to the specifics, the specific thematic groups of those services, and then direct people to our website as well that holds all of the referral information and or contact details of each of the services of which we have members at the forum. So before we look at the sort of and share with you our thoughts around sort of early warning signs and risks and that, we want to share with you now a little video, and this can be a little like the first video at the beginning of the seminar. It asks us just to stop and reflect and think about the definition of homelessness. Well, this next video is very much looking at, and we were very keen when we created this training tool to humanize it, so that it wasn't just data and narrative and the thoughts and experiences of us as forum members, but we wanted to include the voice of people who had experienced homelessness or had experienced the services, the delivery of services to them. So this next piece may be quite emotive for some people. Safe to say that people in the video consented to everything that they had and seen the finishing pieces before we were able to share it. But this is just a piece to look at service users or ex-service users or ex-clients or people with experience, some of their thoughts about what homelessness feels like for them.
The word homeless in itself has changed a lot for me over this past few years. At one stage it was an identity, it was who I was. You know, I wasn't seen as a person. For those years that I was homeless, I was just seen as someone who is homeless.
Homeless means that you don't have somewhere you can go to feel safe.
What it means to me is being afraid. I don't know how you really put it across. Being afraid. Just feeling lousy. Not knowing where your next bed's coming from, where you're going to put your head down, or where your next meal's going to come from. You know what I mean? Because the way I was living from one flat to another flat, to another flat, then up to my daughter-in-law, and then back. I was just being knocked about.
With that word come a lot of negative connotations. There's a great deal of stigma in and around that word as well, and as I moved through my journey then of homelessness, and I got back up on my feet, and I kind of got somewhere to live, the term homeless changed for me because I began to see it for what it really was. It wasn't just the fact that I didn't have a house. I didn't have roots. I didn't have anywhere that I could call home. I didn't have a safe space. And those things for me were all very important to have before I could look at changing anything else in my life.
Made me feel rotten. Made me feel as if I was worthless. You know what I mean? I actually did think of committing suicide. Because I thought the only way out was death.
Worthless. There's no... It's like... There's no accountability in your life. There's no... You know, you're just floating. And... I didn't feel as if my life had any value. I wasn't made to feel as if my life had any value by those around me. I would definitely describe it as a harrowing and traumatic experience.
Okay. So as Declan said, it is quite an emotive video, and again, as the video says, we just want to thank all of the contributors to it. They really made the awareness stream tool what it is. But I want to talk a wee bit more about things that we really need to consider when we're engaging with individuals at risk of homelessness, or indeed the likelihood of becoming homeless. The risk factors that we associate, and we quite often talk about the sort of ACEs, and these number of factors that they might experience, but they do not definitively mean that someone would commence a homeless journey, but it's that they're more likely to. And indeed, that gives us an opportunity to engage, that gives an opportunity to intervene, and that gives an opportunity for change. There's often a historical element to the homelessness embedded in the family unit and family circumstances. Many of the services we'd report, again and again, we're finding people with long intergenerational experience of homelessness. As children, they might have experienced homelessness, and now as adults, they're experiencing homelessness. And you can imagine, if you cannot embed yourself in a community, how traumatic and how difficult that can be. The starting point of the homeless journey is often a result of sudden and in some cases unexpected triggers. So of course we always think about these multi-complex issues, but as you probably may have seen on poster campaigns in the past, it said you're 2 pay packets away from homelessness. And that's probably truer now than it's ever been. We're finding that obviously as the cost of living increase impacts more and more people, the housing executive reporting and more people are presenting as homelessness. They just can't afford to rent in the private sector, or they can't afford to mortgage in the house. And the triggers are inextricably linked to the service users or additional needs, including obviously their health issues and other socio-economic factors. So these are important points to consider. But what should we watch out for? What we should watch out for are what we talk about early warning signs. So again, as individuals, these are just some of the ones that both the housing partners that we have in the forum, but also a number of the services and the service users, we'd say, how did they recognise when things were going wrong? And indeed, how did service recognise? So obvious things like missed housing payments, inquiries from other services. So you might just be dealing with it, there's a number of calls I'm having about that particular client, what's going on. That repeated calls to emergency services, and quite often landlords get them as complaints. That the ambulances are being called late at night and it's waking in the other family members and the kids. The upkeep of property is usually a very good telltale sign. You maybe notice that the neighbours not coming out as much. Maybe when you're going to visit somebody, you notice that it's a lot more unkempt than it's usually been. Or that certain rooms in the house are closed off. Hoarding is a very complex issue. It's a very difficult issue to deal with, but we're seeing that more and more. And again, we would try to say if we can get involved with working with clients at an earlier stage, the better results we can get. Things like debt, loss of employment, a problem with, I suppose, financial issues, obviously are a big key early warning signs to the risk of homelessness. Pets not being looked after, maybe even the pets aren't being, brought out for a walk. Again, what we're trying to say is if we can get involved in these earlier stages, our involvement with the clients might be a very short period of time. It could be really just about establishing them in better services within inside the community. It could be trying to link them into better things and things that make them get a sense of belonging, things that can make a difference to them. And we know because of the nature of how we work. So floating support is housing related support. We work with them in their home. So it's not about them coming to our office, it's about us coming to their home. So we see everything and we can spend time with them. And for most floating support services, we are there for up to 2 years. And sometimes in cases, we might even be able to extend that. And indeed, if we are not the service, so if someone, for example, is referred into NIACRO and they recognise that, I suppose, some of their main issues in relation to their homelessness was around a brain injury, then because of the setup of the forum, because of our knowledge of other floating support services, we would ensure that they are have a warm handover to the other service so that those needs are met. Around the forum, we had an interesting wee thing, and because like myself and Declan, who've been working in homelessness for over 20 years, that's how we're finding a lot of our forum members. And we just had a quick sort of look around the room during one of our meetings, and just in that room, there was over 400 years of experience of homelessness. And that is not any way to say that we know how to do this. We don't. But we know something about it, and we know some ways of this changing, and we know that it can make a difference. And that's what I want to show in the next video.
I asked the lady behind the desk if Triangle could help me, and she said she would make a referral. And a few weeks later, Miss Suzanne Kelly from Triangle Housing came out to see me, and from the very first meeting, things started changing, things started turning around for me. Suzanne called out to see me, and by December 2019, I had tenancy. So 2 months later, I was offered a safe, nice, warm flat in an area that suited me and my children. Since then, I've secured tenancy on the flat, and I've been there for 2 years. Now, in those 2 years, Suzanne has helped me with benefits, with getting a job, with emotional things. Like, she was the one person who said to me, you know, we had the sort of relationship where she felt comfortable enough to ask me about my relationship with my ex-husband. And she helped me look at those feelings and deal with a lot of issues that I still had remaining from the marriage. And in doing that, she freed up a lot of space for me to move on and to eventually go into an adult relationship myself, and to move forward out of that kind of a little rut I was in.
I want to be living independently again. I want to be living on my own, because if this last year has shown me anything, it's that I feel so much more at ease being able to just walk around my own living space however and whenever I want to. But as well as that, I want to get back into education. I want to continue studying, because as I think I've told you before, in years to come I would like to start my own business.
When we were working out benefits one time and budgeting, and she asked about, you know, how much the heating was, and I had said, oh, I only put the heating on when the girls are here. And she just looked at me and she asked me why. And I said, well, to save money. And she said, do you not think you deserve to be warm? Like, she said that to me 2 years ago. I haven't forgot it.
I've got faith now. I got hope. That's only thanks to these people that's helping to look after me. I have my own independence. I can come and go when I want. And I don't need to ask anybody to go from the shops, because I go myself.
Okay, folks. I hope you appreciate. Like I said, we've created this tool to raise awareness around homelessness prevention, but it would be remiss of us not to delve into the promotion side of the work that we do, and just a big shout out. It's always embarrassing. I believe Suzanne Kelly may be on the call. Don't worry, Suzanne, if you are still here, I'm not asking you to come in and say anything, but it's just an example, I think, an example, that last video, of the wealth of experience and positive impact that this sector can have. And this little slide here really is a bit of a word cloud around a piece of research, the piece of research that we carried out a few years back too, about our services and how it helps people. And I'd love just to, I'm quickly just going to share this with you and ask you to again reflect back on that strategy around social work and the work of health and social care. A lot of these words are again, they connect and they coalesce with the health and social care sector. And we have to look at words like health and community a lasting difference, person-centered, mental ill health, support. These are all words, if I understand correctly, are massively linked and massively coalesced with health and social care. So I imagine Suzanne and Paul and myself and many others within the forum who provide these services will tell you that we don't do it alone, that we connect and we do our best, and that is what Floating Support does. It connects and works in partnership and collaborates with community services and services across the sector to better provide for the people that we serve, I suppose. I just want to share with you, and I'm coming very, very close to the end here, and my ask of those that are in attendance. Just wanted to share with you some of the results that we have found from the training tool that we have created. At the beginning of the training tool, we obviously capture a little bit about where people are at as far as their level of awareness around a number of different questions. And we repeat that at the end, I'm sure you'll appreciate. And that for us is to make sure that the content is making a difference. You can clearly see here that from the results so far of the people that have completed the training tool, and I think it's maybe close to 200 now, is that it's proving that it does make a difference, that it does hopefully improve the capacity of our workforce, like we talked about. And these are evaluations that come from people across the sector, not least within Floating Support, but housing. We understand there are people from probation and social services that have completed the training. We know that because we ask people to log in or register on the website and register for the training, and so that you can just receive a little bit of an email acknowledgement of completion of the training once that's been done. But you can clearly see the impact that it's having. We are delighted that so far people are seeing, are certainly feeling like they're more aware of the early indicators and early signs of homelessness, that they know what floating support is, and that's relationship with housing related support, which is the term we prefer to use, and how, more importantly, it prevents homelessness. Really keen to see that the number of floating support services that people are aware of is increasing. Their level of awareness around that is much higher than it was at the beginning when they carried out the training, and more importantly, that they would refer to the services when they recognise someone is at risk. We can see that has increased too. So we're really delighted with the work so far, and that it works, I suppose. Just I want to share with you now, before myself and Paul come to our big ask, is that we want this conversation to continue. Homelessness Awareness Week is this week, and the theme is having the conversation. We want to continue the conversation, and certainly at the forum, we met at the end of the summer and created our own action plan for the year ahead. And much of our action plan is very much centered around, or certainly around the promotion of our services, but the promotion of this training tool, the promotion of this homelessness awareness training tool. And we have had continued conversations, not least with the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. Again, many thanks to Gillian and Alison and all the team for inviting us out today. But we'll continue to have conversations too, not least with Housing Rights, Landlords Association for Northern Ireland, Housing Executive, NIFA, and Northern Ireland Federation for Housing Associations, key players, key landlords that we need to speak to. But we've reached out to the Patient Client Council as well, and the HSC Leadership Centre, to see how we can embed this training within e-learning platforms. And perhaps that might be something, Gillian, we can continue to converse with the Northern Ireland Social Care Council about. I heard your shout out at the very beginning of today's seminar about your own e-learning platform. Perhaps that might be something that we can continue to have a conversation about. But folks, just to say, the website and the training tool is live, and it has been since April of this year. We're really keen, and the ask, I suppose, for anybody that's on the call is to consider going and completing the whole training tool. Register, log in and complete the whole training tool. It would last probably about 45 to 55 minutes to complete, and consider maybe using it within your staff teams. Consider using it when in your staff teams or wherever you think people might find it useful and beneficial, not least to raise their awareness of the early warning signs and the risk factors around homelessness. But hopefully you'll have seen today that it is a little bit of a journey that we take you on, with the inclusion of some ex-clients or ex-service users from some of our member organisations. So it is quite interactive and a nice mix of narrative and video. And you'll see there, and I believe our slides will be shared today with the direct link to the training that we have embedded within the website as well. So really, folks, it's for me to say a huge thank you on behalf of myself and Paul. I always like to end with a little bit of a quote, and the key to it all today for us is about awareness, and it is genuinely like the sun. Where I am, it's breaking out of the clouds at the moment, but when it does shine, things are transformed. This room has certainly lit up a little bit. It was very dark earlier, and the sun's coming out now, and there's a little light in this room that myself and Paul are in. But knowledge is a great tool, and if we can spread the word and raise our level of awareness around this issue and intervene earlier, then we can prevent a lot of people from becoming homeless and prevent a lot of people from falling into crisis. So look, thank you very, very much for your time. It is for me really to go back to Gillian and see if there's any questions perhaps in the chat box that people want to ask, or if there's any burning issues that people want to maybe put to us. We're more than happy to take those.
Mandy had put a couple of questions in the chat. Mandy, maybe you just want to ask those now in person, do you? Since
I always like to get questions in where one would do and get my money's worth. Just really around the cost of living crisis that we're in, and one in terms of the kind of people who are on the verge of becoming homeless because of the situation we're in, and then just also what is it like in terms of housing stock or having properties available for people? Is that also becoming difficult? So just really what it's like currently.
Yeah, Paul, we'll maybe both answer that so that we don't feel like I'm stealing any thunder. Yeah, Mandy, they are burning issues at the moment, and I was up yesterday at the launch of Homeless Awareness Week up in Stornot, that Homeless Connect put on, and they are major issues that are being discussed and talked about. The bottom line is, and it's the reason why myself and Paul on behalf of the forum are very much looking at reaching into particularly the private rented sector to raise the levels of awareness around homelessness prevention, because more and more there is a lean towards the private rented sector to provide for people who are homeless, which is not where we need to be. The level of social housing stock build isn't at the level it needs to be, and hence why there has been a lean more and more towards a private rented sector. And then the private rented sector is becoming more and more out of reach because of its expense and because of some of the barriers that people face when they're moving into the private rented sector, not least deposits and just local housing allowance rates that they can't afford and top-ups that they can't afford. So it isn't great. It is not in a good situation, and I try to stay positive at times, but the situation is very, very poor at the moment. I certainly know there is a number of good pieces of work going on and being attempted, particularly for people with more sort of, and I use this term very loosely, complex needs. I mean, Complex Lives is a program that's trying to be rolled out with the City Council alongside Housing Executive and a number of other services. But the bottom line for me is that more social housing needs built. And if we can't afford that, and it needs to be a mix of both that and private rented sectors stock, then that private rented stock needs to be affordable. And certainly there are key messages that I was shouting about at the Housing Rights Conference last week when I was asked to speak on the cost of living. So it is a bit of a perfect storm at the moment, I think, which isn't great. But sorry, Paul, I could wax on all day about that issue.
No, Mandy, I just think, on the ground, it's probably the key thing that we're finding when we're working with people and individuals. And the key, and as I had mentioned earlier, quite often they're actually at crisis stage, so the tenancy is already broken down. And that's why we want to get it a bit more upstream, because we do know that there are things that we can do. I mean, even we're finding inside the Housing Executive that they're certainly more accepted for people that fell into particular debts, even in relation to tenancy debts. So normally it would have been that if you were in arrears, your tenancy would have been severely at risk, and indeed it might have been a notice to seek possession evicted. However, things like debt relief orders, they're willing to include them. So there are possible things that you can do. And again, even things about maximising people's benefits. Again, if we can get in there early, we still constantly hear people underclaiming benefits and underclaiming other additional supports. Declan did allude to the housing supply strategy, or even it's a 15-year strategy. It's 100,000 homes, and that falls way, way short of actually what we will need. So even this quite grandiose sort of housing strategy still falls well short, and we as a forum certainly responded to the strategy in that way. But as Declan says, private landlords are going to be more and more relied on. And I think there is a difference and a change in conversation as opposed to just having the conversation around the private landlords. I think there's a view quite often that they're quite unscrupulous landlords. And I'm not here to defend landlords and say that there aren't landlords with bad practice. However, quite a lot of landlords just feel very unsupported. They actually aren't aware of services like ourselves. And they would feel that, you know, actually, if a service could be there to support my tenants, actually, I could probably negotiate a slightly cheaper rent. If I thought this could be somebody, if they had crisis, they would get support. Sometimes landlords feel that they're just cut adrift. They're giving these tenants, particularly in temporary accommodation, and they're just cut adrift with no services, no support when things do go wrong. Don't know if that answers everything, Mandy, but
just to allude to that point of Paul's too around the private rented sector. I mean, we've seen an increase to that. I mean, there is regulation, private rented regulation that is passed this year. The only one piece of that has fallen into action immediately was the notice to quit periods that people need to give. But certainly over the next 12 months, there is more regulation being looked at around EPC ratings of private rented properties, caps to rent potentially. I know there's a hell of a lot of consultation needs to go on about that. Because there's arguments to say that actually if you cap rents, it'll send the private rented sector away, and then you'll not be able to utilize that as a means to preventing homelessness or solving some of the issues around that. So regulation is coming into the private rented sector. It's about finding the right balance, I think, when we've become so over reliant on it. You need to be careful we don't scare it away completely, particularly when we're trying to solve this issue, you know.
I'm hoping that answered everything for you, Mandy.
That was great. Yes, thank you. Very comprehensive.
Does anybody else on the screen have any questions for Paul or Declan? They've very kindly shared their email addresses with us, so people can, I suppose, come back to them individually as well if they have anything they want to ask.
And we're certainly out there now on our website too, so we're very public. It's
Yes.
me and Paul's
Be able to track them
address that's on the
down.
website.
And if you come to me, I'll also send you to Declan. So all roads lead to Declan. Well, if there aren't any more questions for the call, we'll just thank everybody for coming along today. We thank Paul and Declan for a very emotive presentation at times, and always very good to hear the voice of the service users in there, and the transformation that some of them have been on, and it has sounded like that some of them are still going on that journey. So really, really interesting and emotive presentation, and I think I'll certainly be going off to do the training and work my way through the tools. So thank you very much. We've recorded the session today. Obviously people will know that will go out to anybody who signed up for the session, but will also go up on our website. So we'll try to reach as many people as we can with these lunchtime seminars, and a really important message to be getting out there in Homelessness Awareness Week. So lovely to have you both, and thank you for doing that presentation for us.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Cheerio.